Hey everybody, I'm East Coast Pete. Welcome to my show for drummers only. Last time we talked about Bill Bruford. It seems only fitting that we should do a segment on Mr. Carl Palmer. He was born in 1950, an English drummer with bands The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, Atomic Rooster, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Asia. Drum lesson from youth. His first band, the King Bees, renamed Craig when American band King Bees was learned of. Can't have two King Bees. And he recorded a single, I Must Be Mad, was backed with Suspense, and Palmer also did session work for studios in the Midlands area. Palmer's next placed with Chris Farlow and the Thunderbirds. Then he replaced Draken Viaker in The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, who had a hit single with Fire. Palmer would leave Arthur Brown in 1969 with Vincent Crane on keyboards, and they formed Atomic Rooster. With bassist Nick Graham, Arthur Brown had abruptly disappeared from the music scene to live at a commune in Long Island. Atomic Rooster put out two albums in 1970, Atomic Rooster and Death Walks Behind You. Palmer was recruited by Keith Emerson. Now, Emerson was a keyboard player for the Nice, and bassist vocalist Greg Lake was most recently from King Crimson. Keith and Greg auditioned several drummers, including Mitch Mitchell of the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Palmer was chosen. Emerson and Lake agreed that the chemistry with Palmer was right. ELP, aka Emerson, Lake and Palmer, began work in the summer of 1970, and they were together for a decade. Their sound was a combination of art rock, jazz, pop, and experimental electronica that prog. Emerson was a classically trained pianist, and Lake also played guitar and wrote lyrics. The trio combined classical and symphonic music with jazz, not to mention early Moog synthesizer, Hammond organ, and piano. And without a doubt, Carl Palmer's drumming was groundbreaking in popular music. No rock drummer at the beginning of the 70s could rival Carl Palmer until Bill Bruford and his band Yes hit. Now, the concert circuit and Phil Collins joined Genesis. This all happened right around 1970. And ELP had immediate success right after their appearance in the Isle of Wight Festival in 1970. It was in August. And the first album was distributed by Island in the UK and Atlantic in the States. In January 1971, recording at Advision Studios to 3 months. It charted to number 17. The single was Lucky Man. The lyrics were by Lake. He wrote those lyrics as a young teenager. The song went to number 48 in the US. And the sleeve art by Nick Dartnell originally was intended for the US band Spirit. The bald man's face on the left was Spirit drummers Ed Cassidy, but the artist says it was a different bird. It was on the back of 12 Dreams of Dr. Sardonicus, for the painting didn't arrive in time for the printing, and the bald man on the ELP debut was not Ed Cassidy at all. Here's the songs. Number 1, The Barbarian. This is a rock arrangement of a Bela Bartok piano piece called Allegro Barbaro. And the drums were incredible. Number 2, Take a Pebble, a Greg Lake number with water-like percussion. Somehow, Palmer was making his drum set sound like a drop in the water. Knife Edge, a rocked up version of Leo Janáček's Sinfonietta and Bach's French Suite in D minor. Emerson liked his classical music. 4, The Three Fates, as in the Three Fates of Moirai, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos of Greek mythology, played as a keyboard suite with Palmer's percussion surfacing in the third movement, which is polyrhythmic. Tank, Palmer's solo spot, a drum solo flanked by clavinet and Moog synthesizer. And then the single Lucky Man, also on Brain Salad Surgery and Quad. The next album, Tarkus, went to number 1 in the UK and number 9 in the US. There was a 20-minute multi-part prog rock suite comprised all of side 1. It's a concert piece, the war theme. Side 2 is 6 unrelated shorter songs. So it's only half a concept. Pictures at an Exhibition. This is a live LP. ELP's take on the Modesta Migorsky song poem. And their next album, Trilogy, with cover art by Hypnosis. The Hoedown track was adapted from an Aaron Copland composition. The Endless Enigma, a suite in 3 parts. Part 1 begins with Palmer's bass drum mimicking a beating heart, but may have been done by Lake on a muted bass. I'm not going to tell you. You gotta listen. Decide for yourself. Songs From the Beginning. The single went to number 39. And the drum solo opens The Sheriff. You can barely hear Palmer yelling, "Shit," when he hit the rim of his tom-tom accidentally. Gotta listen real careful for that. It's there. Abaddon's a bolero. It builds like Ravel's bolero, also builds on successive overdubs by Emerson. The critics didn't like Trilogy, but the fans did. They liked it just fine. Now, H.R. Geiger painting was the sleeve of Brain Salad Surgery. Geiger almost created a stunning version of Herbert's Dune, but the money fell short. It's okay, I, like other Dune fans, love the David Lynch version, and we anticipate the 2020 release of the new Denis Villeneuve version. Get you some Dune action here. Some God Emperor. As for Brain Salad Surgery, it went to number 2 in the UK and number 11 in the US. ELP began their own publishing company. It was named Manticore. The album managed to polarize both critics and fans. Rolling Stone magazine liked it enough to call it the 12th greatest prog album of all time. I'll have to give it another whirl. I've Always thought it was a little over the top. That's really saying something for an ELP work. Then their album Works, it was a double LP. Side 3 is all Palmer with an orchestra. Joe Walsh played guitar on LA Nights track. And Volume 2, Blues, Bluegrass, and Jazz by ELP. I don't think the fans like this one too well. Only for the real collector. But you know what? Before this next album comes out, you're going to run to the stores and flock to buy Blues, Bluegrass, and Jazz because their next album was called Love Beach. And I am sorry, but this one really blows. The album is made to fulfill a contract with Atlantic, recorded as tax exiles in the Bahamas, and the sleeve art showed ELP as late 70s disco stars, which they weren't. It's called false advertising. And there's been a reunion of ELP in the mid-90s. Albums released Black Moon and In the Hot Seat, but ELP was a 70s band. Enough said. Emerson lost control of his right hand due to an inflamed ulnar nerve. Surgery didn't help. Carl Palmer had carpal tunnel syndrome, but surgery was successful. Emerson also had a tumor on his colon at the time of his death by his own hand via a gunshot. Emerson's neighbor in Santa Monica was none other than John Lydon of Johnny Rotten fame. The Sex Pistols had harshly criticized ELP in the 70s during the Sex Pistols' heyday, but as a neighbor, he became Emerson's friend. Quote, "He's a great bloke," unquote, Lennon said of Keith. Carl Palmer released an album with Texas blues guitarist John Nitzinger. He then joined John Wetton of King Crimson and Uriah Heep and Steve Howe of Yes, forming Asia. Palmer left Asia to take part in an ELP reunion in 1991, but he returned in 2006. Today, Palmer hosts drum clinics in the US and the UK and across Europe. Palmer also is famous for taking off his t-shirt while performing the double bass drum part of his drum solo. Palmer's drum camp will meet in 2019 in Philadelphia, if anybody is interested in that. I've got to mention Palmer's 2.5-ton steel drum kit, which he had made as a one-off. He also had another kit made of bronze. Why? Why not? Well, thank you for being with me on my For Drummers Only. And the next show we do, this is a preview. We're going to talk about Mr. Richie Hayward, drummer for Little Feat. Thank you all for being here with me. Hope I've helped to clear up a few things about Carl Palmer and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Thanks again. See you next time on For Drummers Only.